This is John from Sharp Mountain Games, and today we're taking a look at WhiteBox, fantastic medieval adventure game. So WhiteBox is a little digest-sized book. It's 5.5 by 8.5, so a regular piece of computer paper folded in half. And it is essentially a cleanup of Swords and Wizardry WhiteBox. And it was written and edited by Charlie Mason with beautiful cover art by Eric Lofgren and some really nice interior art by William McCausland, and James V. West did the character sheet. So let's take a look inside the book. So here's the interior cover page, and you can see by Seattle Hill Games there. And the introduction talks about how this is a cleanup or a rewrite of Swords and Wizardry WhiteBox. Now, what is WhiteBox? What it is an attempt to write a game that's very, very close to the original Dungeons & Dragons. So this would be before kind of the basic and expert editions came out, very close to the original, 1974 edition, certainly before Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Now, I'm not a game historian, so I can't tell you exactly which rules are slightly different, and that's not the point here. So they give you, the getting started, and really stressing that this is a very light rule set. Holes are left open on purpose that the GM or the Dungeon Master is going to have to fill in. And they call it a referee here, I guess, for copyright purposes. And you can see some really nice art here. And they give you all the usual stuffed dice. And here's what's really nice. This is not written as a catechism. There are optional rules, and Charlie Mason does suggest ways that you might want to change the game or make it more to your own liking. And I just love that. I think that's great. I think that's really the spirit of the hobby. And here's a hand-drawn character sheet. So, they certainly have their own kind of charm to them. Now, let's talk a little bit about this game compared to, say, other retro clones, which are trying to, duplicate or be in the same spirit as Dungeons & Dragons of the 70s and 80s. Notice the attribute bonus table there on the right. 3 to 6 is -1, 7 to 14 is 0, 15 to 18 is +1. So really your attribute scores are not going to have a huge effect on most of the rolls you make, because on a D20 roll, a plus or -1 is plus or minus 5%. So characters in this old school style are a lot more defined by their character class and what their character class can do, and especially by what the player does, more so than mechanical and add rolls. Now, if this isn't to your taste, absolutely you could say, well, I want to use the attribute bonuses from, say, the BX editions of basic Dungeons & Dragons or something like that, or even could use a modern table. You can do that. You would be easily able to port that in, and you're really not going to break anything. You get the experience points bonuses for the high prime attribute and the standard strength, intelligence, wisdom, constitution, dexterity, and charisma and all that. And charisma can give you extra hirelings. Hit points. This is something interesting. The hit points here, everybody has D6 hit points. But what varies is the different classes won't all get the same full 1d6 roll every round. And we'll show you that when we get into the different classes. And there's alignment. So all this is very standard and familiar to anyone who's played Dungeons & Dragons. But now let's look at what's a little bit different here with the character classes. So here's our cleric. And as usual, there's spellcasting and turn undead and all that. But if you take a look at this chart here, okay, so clerics get 1 hit dice. They get 1d6 possible hit points at first level. You could make that a max, just give them a max of 6 if you like. But look at, say, 4th level. They just get an extra hit point. Now, the reason for that is it kind of keeps the clerics and the wizards and the thieves from getting as many hit points as, say, the fighters, who are definitely going to be stronger and, a more martial class. Look at those 2 hit bonuses, too, there. For the first 3 levels, the cleric doesn't get any bonus to hit. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we get into the monsters. You're going to say, well, if you compare that to, say, 5e, if you had a really high attribute, that could be up to +3, and then with a +2 proficiency bonus, you could have a +5 to hit at first level. Here you got a 0. Now, in a way, this would be nice and easy for teaching new players. You don't have to worry always about adding so many modifiers to everything. A lot of times you could just say, well, roll the d20 and let's see what you get. The downside of that is it does make the player characters a little bit weaker. And like I said, when we get to the monsters, I want to talk about a way to kind of adjust for that, so you're not just killing characters left and right. And it's very standard with the spells. You'll notice that the levels only go up to 10. He does give you some optional rules here in the book if you want to go past level 10. However, I think it's also, sometimes people will see this and say, oh, I want something that goes 20 levels. But most campaigns don't go that high. They just don't last that long. Or even if they do, you're playing with a regular group of friends, sometimes by 10th level, people are ready to make some changes or try something different. So I don't think that's in any way a knock against the game. And then pretty standard turn undead chart, just like always. Now the fighter. You'll notice the fighter gets 1 hit dice every single level. They're going to be the most powerful characters. Theoretically, they could have up to 10 hit dice, so that would be 60 hit points possible. On average, that would be more like 35 or 36. Even the fighter doesn't get a 2-hit bonus at first level, but beyond that, then they really do start to bump up a bit with their 2-hit bonuses. And it also interesting, they have this combat fury. Against foes of 1 hit dice or fewer, fighters get 1 attack per level each combat round. So if you're a 5th level fighter fighting like a 1st level goblin, you can get 5 attacks there. So it's kind of like a mook rule to take care of especially weak opponents, or you could think of somebody like Aragorn plowing through a whole horde. So the fighter is pretty standard. And then we have our magic users here with the spell casting. And magic users are pretty weak. At most they're going to have 6 + 1, so at most they're going to have 35 hit points. Realistically, on average, they're going to have, maybe 15 to 20, even at 10th level. And the thief is listed as an optional class, because from what I understand in the first original books, thief was not a class, and it didn't appear until a little bit later. So again, it's trying to keep in the spirit of the original D&D. But the thief is certainly here for you to use. Interestingly, it uses a 1d6 mechanic for thief skills. So if you're used to all the little fiddly percentages, and I don't mind percentages, but they can get really fiddly in basic Dungeons & Dragons and advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Here it's 1d6. For a few levels, you succeed on a 1 or a 2 on a d6, and then it bumps up to 3 and 4 and 5. And that's really nice. I think it's a nice, easy mechanic. And then it gets into the character races. Pretty standard. You have your dwarf, you have your elf. And they give you a variant where you have kind of an elf fighter magic user, which was in the basic Dungeons & Dragons. So that's available here. In that way, elf is more of a class than a race. But the dwarves and the halflings and the elves can just be bolted onto the other classes, although they have some limitations, like the halfling here or the hobbit can only be a fighter or a thief. And then pretty standard equipment. And this is nice. Like I said, one of the nice things about this book is that it gives you options. Want to use descending armor class because you're a traditionalist? It's here. Want to use ascending armor class because you want to do something a little more modern? And let's be honest, it's a little easier maybe for newer players to do ascending armor class. It's all in here. And all the weapons do 1d6 damage. In some cases, a little bit more. Like a battle axe will do 1d6 + 1, whereas a dagger does 1d6 - 1. So really, to play this whole game, you can do it with a d20 and a d6, and that's it. You don't necessarily need all those other dice. And then playing the game. So this is the rules section. This is completely going to be familiar to anybody who's played any edition with your movement. Again, it uses the d6 for opening stuck doors, like a 1 and a 2 for elves, dwarves and halflings a little bit less. I guess they're intended to be a little bit weaker. So it's using a D6. You could almost do a D6 skill system and bolt that on here if you like. Secret doors, finding the secret doors, and elves have a little better chance on finding them. Searching for traps. So all this is very familiar ground. It suggests that a D6 initiative and just side initiative. And that does work much quicker. But you can also do some optional rules. Certainly you could do individual initiative and add a dex bonus if you have one, if you like. And then it gives an alternate combat sequence here to start to bring surprise into the equation. And like I said, everything here is very familiar. So let's move along. Oh, it does give you charts for those of you who played long ago and like to have a little chart. And sometimes that is quicker than doing the addition. You can make a chart for each weapon or for ranged or melee attacks. It's really not as bad as you think. I played with it for a number of years and it works just fine. Or you can just use the modern where you roll, add your bonus, and see if you beat the armor class. So as I said, all this I think is very, very standard. You have loyalty for retainers. It does use, and one thing I like, is it uses a single saving throw as an option. But if you want the more detailed saving throws of old school systems, they're here. Like if you want to have death saves and poison saves and wands and raise and paralyze, they're all there if you like them. I personally just think that single saving throw is a lot easier for most people. And spells and magic. Again, this is very, very similar. Now, you may notice here that the spells lists are really, really trimmed down, especially for the clerics. A little bit fewer options maybe than in some other editions. If you don't like this, bring your own spell list in. You can do that. Bring it in from another game. Interesting level 6 spells are not detailed. It says only the gods know. And magic users get a few more choices here, but they're all very standard. Charm person, light spells, magic missile, and things like that. And so all very, very standard stuff from regular D&D. And we get into the spell descriptions. Bulleted points, which is nice. It makes it easy to read them. So let me flip down here to see all the spell lists. Then we get into the running the game. This is kind of game master advice. And it really is good, even for someone who's run for a number of years. I really enjoyed reading this chapter. And it gives you a little idea of, doing underworld and wilderness. And do you want to use wandering monsters? And if you want to, you can use a reaction check. If you're not sure how the monster will respond to the person, it's just a 2d6 roll. So there's some good game master advice here. And then there's some charts here to start thinking about, well, how many monsters do you want in your different dungeon levels, which would, I think, correspond to the level of the party. And some wandering monster charts here. And then we get into the monsters. And there's no huge surprises here. Everything works exactly as you would think. Now here's something to note. This is the monster to-hit table, or the monster attack rolls table. Monsters are slightly more powerful than the others. So if you look here at first level, you're basically adding a +1 to their attack rolls. At second level, basically a +2, which is actually more than the player characters. So you might say, oh my gosh, that's horrible. We're going to just have a TPK every time. Well, there's ways around that. Because I think you do want to give your players a fair chance. If every session is just them dying and rolling up a new character, that can be a grind. Let's just be honest. So an option is fewer monsters. So for example, think about TV shows, maybe like Supernatural. They're pretty much hunting one vampire that week or one, ghoul or whatever. You don't necessarily want your characters always to be going up against a lot of monsters. For example, I was reading a later edition adventure and it says, oh, well, you should have 3 orcs per party member or 2 goblins per party member. It should kind of be the opposite for old school. If there's 3 orcs in a cave and you have 6 players, that probably will work out just fine, especially at first level. Or, again, it's a difference in thinking that maybe the party needs to think about, hey, maybe we need to lure these orcs out, and our thief is kind of waiting on top of the cave to jump down and backstab them, that we need other techniques to try and defeat them. So we get into the monster descriptions, and there's some artwork for some of them. That's actually a pretty nice bugbear there, centipedes. And it goes through all the standard monsters you'd expect, like dragons and elementals. And they give you some information about elves and dark elves and things like that. So even if you decide, well, I don't want to play this particular white box edition, you could always use the monsters and, slot them into any old school game. All these old school games are very, very compatible and easy to switch between one or the other. So you get a nice little monster section here, all the standards. And does suggest some ways to make monsters a little bit tougher if you like, or how to create your own. Like if you want a 4th level monster or 4 hit dice monster, it just gives you, it says, okay, here's the hit dice, here's the base to hit, here's the saving throw, here's the XP. And if you want to give them a special ability, they have some spell-like ability, it's easy to do that to create your own monsters. And you're going to want to do that because there aren't, this isn't a full monster manual that they give you. It's kind of a starting point. And then, of course, it gets into treasure and how to award treasure here. And also, there is XP awarded for treasure, I believe, here. So, there is an advantage to maybe just scaring the monsters away and get their XP or get their goals or gold rather than necessarily having to have everything be a slog and a kill box. And magic potions and scrolls and magic items, exactly what you'd expect in any game. Staffs and, some standard like, the Cloak of Elvenkind and things like that, Cloak of Protection, crystal balls. Oh, this is nice, too. They give you a deck of many things and suggest how you could do this using standard playing cards. So you could just have a deck of standard playing cards, or you could get a deck on, use an online virtual deck. And not all of the items in the deck of many things are benevolent. You have to watch. Like if you get the Queen of Spades, the character dies instantly. That's pretty rough. Or the Ace of Spades, you lose a level of experience. So you kind of have to be careful if you're going to be using magic all the time. And then here's a few more magic items and some cursed items. Like I said, not everything you find in the dungeon is for you. And look at the beauty of this page. A whole blank page for you to write down your house rules if you like. So that's just, I think that's the beautiful thing because it says that's the blank page. Here's your imagination. And that's where it comes in. And they give you a character sheet in case you want to photocopy it. Oh, you can also get the PDF, I believe, for free on drivethrurpg. I'm going to check that out. And then you get the open gaming license, and that's inside the book. So let's wrap up and take some final thoughts on the book. So who should buy this book? If you're interested in a look at what the very early editions of Dungeons & Dragons look like, this is a good book to do that with. If you're interested in a very, very light system, again, this is a good book to do that with. But when you play it, and for your players, everybody has to go in with the mindset that they're not superheroes, especially at lower levels. That gameplay is going to be a little bit different than, say, the current edition of the game. That you're not going to want to be rushing in at the bear or the orcs or anything like that right away. If you're looking for a one-book system, this is it. In just one little, very small book, a little more than 100 pages, you have the complete game system. I actually think this would be very good for solo play because there's not as many modifiers that you're fiddling with. I think if you wanted to do solo play with maybe a party of 4 or 5, it would be much easier to keep track of things. And then when they level up, it's pretty easy. You don't have to, for example, add all the different type or look at all the different types of saving throws or all the many different types of thieves skills. It's just a few things, check the charts, and really quickly you could level them up. So in that way, I think it would be really great for solo play. And I also think if you're somebody who likes to hack a system, this is good because there's a bare bones of the system here. There's just enough. And if you decide you want to add something to it, odds are you're really not going to break it. So it could be very fun in that regard. Now, if you already own some other old school retro clones, like I'm real fond of Basic Fantasy, you might say, do I really need this or don't I really need this? I still think there's some good writing in here and some good game master advice to consider. And here's the real selling point. I said at the end of we were looking inside the book, I would check. It is free. The PDF is free on drive-thru. So you can take a look at it today, right now, and see whether it's for you. And if you want to buy a print copy, as of right now, as of the recording of this video, it's $4.30 on Amazon. I mean, that's really about the price of a comic book, or you could pay more than that for a comic book nowadays. So it is really, really cheap, really, really affordable. I think it's worth taking a look at if you're interested in really old school editions. So thanks very much for watching. And if you'd like to check out the titles from Sharp Mountain Games, you can see our 2 in-print adventures, The Dwarven Pickup Truck and The Sky Tree, at Amazon, Lulu, or drivethrurpg. You can also check out our digital titles, which include adventures, map packs, new character classes, and character cards, and they're at drivethrurpg or the Roll20 Marketplace. Wherever you like to shop, odds are that we're there. So you know what to do. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. All the links to our products are in the description below. And thanks, and we hope to see you again soon.